story of Nehemiah. It's Nehemiah inspecting Jerusalem's walls, and it can be found on page 752 in your Pew Bible, page 540 in the Kids Bible, and it's Nehemiah 2, verses 11 through 20. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. By night, I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. "What is this you are doing?" they asked. "Are you rebelling against the king?" I answered them by saying, "The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it." May God bless the reading of this word.
Last weekend I went to my parents' 50th wedding anniversary in Norris Springs, Iowa. I didn't see any of you there. But you know where Norris Springs is, right? Back there, thank you. That's good to know. It's a thriving metropolis, 1,000 people. It's just to the east of Mason City, Iowa, which is about 44,000 so folks or whatever. But I lived there from my very beginning all the way through high school, and we never moved. And then in college, I stayed in Iowa, and then it wasn't until a year after college that I moved out and moved to the Twin Cities for a short time. But if you would go to North Springs today, it's different than when I was growing up, because what happened was Mason City started to expand its boundaries, basically, and expanded further to the east, which included grocery stores and other retail centers, and they started going to the east a bit. So the folks in North Springs started to go and visit those grocery stores and so forth. And so my little hometown that had a Gamble's. Did anyone have a Gamble's in your hometown? Gamble's, yeah, that was fun. We had 2 grocery stores. I worked at one, Kluver's grocery store, where there's a friendly smile in both the aisles. But if you would go to North Springs today, Kluver's grocery store is still standing, but it is dead. There are still food on the shelves, but that food has been on the shelves now for about 20 years. The awning is kind of like this, and there are all kinds of boxes that are in the aisles. It looks pretty much desolate. It's not fun to walk down Main Street. There was a house that's on the edge of town called Gaylord Mansion. I remember seeing it as a kid. I'm sure in its day, it was a gorgeous house. It was red brick, and it had a beautiful front porch to it, and the yard was surrounded by this, not a wire fence, a black iron fence, the kind that are in cemeteries, that kind of fence. And it said, no trespassing, so they didn't want you to go in. But from afar, you could see that it was a gorgeous house. And I wanted to restore that house someday. I mean, it was a part of the community. It should have been nice. But I don't have the money to do that, nor did anybody else in town even have the desire, it seemed, to do that. So it just remains on the outside of town as a broken down, kind of shambles old house that once was glorious. I want you to think of something that you would, if you had unlimited resources, if you could do anything you wanted to, what is something that you would rebuild or restore or make it look better than it was? I mean, I like going. Was the city of Anoka, did that ever look kind of shamblish or not? I don't know. There's some people who are going, yes, it was. Yes, probably because you live someplace else, right? I want you to think of some place like that. Here's another example. We lived in a town called Norcross. Norcross is 85 people, including all the cats and dogs. And it's a suburb of Herman, Minnesota. Herman is the big city with 485 people. And that's where we lived. We lived in Norcross. Well, at one time, I'm sure it was, they had a school. The school's no longer functioning. The walls are kind of crumbling down. It had a big community center. We hoped and we told our kids never, ever to go into those doors because it was dangerous in there. I know one time they disobeyed at least once. But after a while, you don't see it anymore. But when friends would come to visit us in Norcross, they would have this look in their eyes like this. You live here. I want you to think of a place that you would like to rebuild, restore. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to get with a couple other folks. You can move around if you want to. You can, and talk with them. I want you to think of something that you would like to rebuild or restore. Now, if you don't know the people who are around you, I invite you to invite them to share their names with you. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. Now, here's the deal. If you don't want to do this, here's what you do. And nobody will bother you. Just be in prayer. That will work. Okay, so that will work. You can move around if you want to. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And there won't be any police. I won't ask you afterwards what you talked about. So if you're going to gossip about why in the heck is he making us do all this, you can do that if you want to. But I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Go. Talk about something you'd like to build or restore. Morning.
Hi.
How are you?
Fix my kitchen and dining room bigger.
Ooh.
Oh. Cooking.
all kinds of body changing stuff. About halfway through, so you got about another minute and a half. I'm going to ask that you start wrapping it up. The reason I'm asking you to find out something that you'd like to rebuild or restore is because that's what Nehemiah was about. How many of you know the story of Nehemiah? Do not say anything, Margaret, or he'll call on you. Don't say anything. All right, well, let's back up a bit. So before we get to Nehemiah, let's go back. We're going to go back and talk about the kings. We have the kingdom era. Remember, who's the first king of Israel? Anybody? Saul. Good. The first king of Israel was Saul. Hey, for those of you who, they went to the first service too. Okay. All right, so first king is Saul. The second king, the most favorite king of all, slews a giant. David. All right, it's getting better. All right, so the third king, who is the wisest king? Solomon. We're getting more. And then after Solomon, we have this civil war. Remember the civil war? So Solomon has a bunch of kids, and they all want to be king. So we have, what happens is the northern kingdom is Israel, and the southern kingdom is Judah. You'll read about this in 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. So the northern kingdom gets destroyed fairly early, or they get dispersed. The southern kingdom stays around for a little bit longer. That's the southern kingdom is called Judah. But after a while, here, mostly here in the southern kingdom, we get all these prophets who are coming to the southern kingdom kings. And they keep saying, listen, king, unless you shape up, your nation is going to be shipped out. Do you think the kings listen? No, they don't. So eventually Assyria from the north comes down, takes basically the whole kingdom, and they literally do ship them off, and they ship them off to Babylon. They ship them off to the east. Now, this kind of thing continues to happen. How many have heard of the Holocaust before? Oh, some. Okay, good. All right. What happened to the Jews in the Holocaust? They're shipped out. They're exterminated. Now, we know that all the Jews got exterminated, right? How many of you watched Schindler's List? Okay, so you know some of the Jews got I want you to think of the same framework, what's happening here in the book of Nehemiah. So we had this exile. They got shipped out, and now Nehemiah is over here. Meanwhile, over in Babylon, what happens here is that the Persians take over. So the Persians take over Babylon. So the Babylonians are no longer in control. It's the Persians, and the Persians take control all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. So all the way to the west coast of Israel. Okay, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, for 70 years. There is this exile that happens over there, and now what we'll call Persia. And this guy, Nehemiah, that we read from today, he's the king's cupbearer, which means that he gets to taste the king's wine. How many of you would like that job? No? I know some of you would like that job. I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege. There is a couple here that are from the Crossroads Community Church in Spicer, Dave and Pat Everman. I want you to welcome them. My own son won't let me introduce him, but I didn't even ask them, because I know who would like to taste the wine over there. Okay. All right. Now, he's the wine bearer to the king. His job, remember, he is a Jew. So he's already in the king's court. That's pretty special for him to be in the king's court, but it doesn't make any difference who you are. When you're in the king's presence, you're supposed to be continually happy. But Nehemiah comes, and he is sad in the king's court. I want you to hear what Nehemiah, I invite you to read the book of Nehemiah either today or sometime this week. It's not a long book, but I want you to get a sense of what's going on here. Nehemiah, here's this Jew, and he has heard word about what's going back on in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, literally all the walls that surround the city, that keep it, that's kept that city from being the wonderful city on a hill that it was, those walls have all tumbled down. They've been burnt, the gates have been burnt, the place is in ruins. And Nehemiah feels so sad about his hometown looking like that. Because not only is it his hometown, he understands that Jerusalem is the place, the temple is where God resides. And so he desires for Jerusalem, particularly the temple, to be rebuilt. And so he has heard word that things are not well in Jerusalem. Now, for a time, when people return back to Jerusalem, some of them never go back. Some of them have intermarried over there with the Persians, and so they said their kids are there. They decide, well, we're just going to stay here. We're not going to go back there. That was a place where Grandpa and Grandma's house was. That's fine. We're just going to stay here. But Nehemiah is going, it's not just a place where Grandpa and Grandma work. That's where God's temple is at. Jerusalem. And so he has this desire to go back and to rebuild the city. Now, Nehemiah is a Jew. He's working for the government. He prays. He prays basically the same prayer that all of us prayed this morning when we prayed the prayer of the day. So if you relook at that, you'll find out he does pray that, God, I know that we've been a wicked folk. But I ask, dear God, that you would give success to us in your favor. And that's the end of his prayer. The king sees him now and says, why are you so sad? You're not sick. You don't have the flu. What's wrong? So he says, if you'll permit me, king, let me tell you that I'm sad because of what's going on back home in Jerusalem. So the king says, all right, what do you want me to do about it? Nehemiah says, well, I could use a grant. I could use some government funding. So Nehemiah becomes this lobbyist. The government, the king, gives the lobbyist some money and some protection, and then Nehemiah goes off to Jerusalem. When Nehemiah comes to Jerusalem, he finds it's worse than he thought. Here is this one guy, and the place is broken, tumbling down. Although he has some money from the king, he knows he doesn't have enough money to do what needs to be done. He goes out at night to examine everything because there are other people living there too. And they say, we don't want you to succeed. Who do you think you are? I want to hold them for a moment. My hunch is that at some point in your life, maybe even today, you're at a place where you don't know what to do. Maybe you're broken down and you have no idea what's going to come next. Maybe you don't have the resources in order to do what you think should be done, but you know if I just had this, I could get this done, and the resources just don't seem like they're forthcoming. That's Nehemiah. So listen to what he does. First of all, he says to the naysayers, I love it. He says to them, you really have no place here. You have no place. And then what he does is he starts to get around with these other folks, other Jewish folks, and he said, this place is a shambles. Will you help me build it? And they're looking at him like, oh yeah, we can't do this, blah, 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 blah. Have you ever met naysayers before in your life? Yeah. I can't do that. You don't have this, you don't have that. It's going to be too expensive. The city won't let you do that. Blah, blah. So he says, will you just build this part? This part. Will you just do this much? I want you to, I know that all of you know Bob and Laura Camp, but they're back there. This is Bob and Laura Camp, okay? This is Bob. I got too many projects. I got too many. I can't do all that kind of stuff. And this is Laura. You get your butt out there, Bob. You are going to build that wall. I'll let you come in for lunch. What? So Nehemiah invites other people to do the wall. Does he get it done? Oh, you betcha. Could he do it alone? No. Could he do it just by inviting other people? He did it because he asked God, the ruler of us all, to intercede. And even when he couldn't see it, God was still at work. Moment by moment, step by step. Friends, that's what we all need to do. When you are at the turtle's belly, that's the time especially that you need to turn to the one who can flip everything over. Now, it may not happen all on our schedules. It may not happen like in a moment, but God is at work. Read the book of Nehemiah today. Find out what happens. You can skip over the names if you want to. God works through his people. God works through you. Amen.